Florida upset Auburn last week. So, can they do the same against LSU this week? Iowa struggled to score at Michigan, and now they host James Franklin and the fourth-ranked Penn State defense. But can Franklin improve upon his dreadful historical trend against conference-winning teams on the road? The shootout series continues as Texas tries to avenge losing the Big 12 title game to the Sooners. Can they cover in this regular season series for a seventh straight time? Mitch and I are going to give you our analysis on these games, including updated championship odds, the best from the group of five, game odds, injury updates, our picks, and much more on OFN College Football Weekly with Mitch Light of Athlon Sports for this Thursday, the 10th of October, 2019, on the Our-Lads Football Radio Network, brought to you by ourlads.com, the king of online football depth charts and college football scouting. Also, Athlon Sports, the leading publisher of preseason annuals for more than 50 years, sold in 60,000 outlets nationwide with the help of my partner, Mitch Light. How's it going, Mitch?
It's going well. I'm, it's a good time of year. Got baseball playoffs, got college football, got midweek football. It's can't complain.
Yeah, wow. What a way. That was a defensive battle last night in the Sun Belt. It's a huge early season game. Matter of fact, the Wednesday-Thursday game, you had the top four remaining undefeated teams in Sun Belt play. We got the one game tonight, which we'll get into that. You like Monroe against Texas State. And App State up 10-7, 4th and 1 at midfield. And a very, very questionable decision not to go for it. They punt, and App State holds on to the ball for the last, 10 minutes. It was 11 minutes left in the game. They gave the ball back with 2 minutes to go. It was actually about 30 minutes of real time. They had the football, and then they scored a touchdown after converting 2 fourth downs on that series and beat Lafayette 17-7.
Perfect way to end the game. Yep, I was watching baseball, kept flipping around. Every time I flipped back, they still had the ball. It was an epic drive.
Right? It's like, what the heck's going on here? But that's why App State's the king of the conference, right?
Yep.
And a tough one, though, the rematch of the Sun Belt. Maybe we'll see it again. Still possible. We could still see these two teams in the Sun Belt championship game again. Who is the second best team in the Sun Belt? You got Arkansas State, you got Lafayette, Louisiana Monroe.
Troy or Louisiana Lafayette, I would say.
And then, Troy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Troy, last week, we got to see the difference between coaching in that type of game with or without Neil Brown. Big difference.
Sometimes just tough matchups. So certain games, teams get overwhelmed athletically, too.
Okay, let's start with the SEC and the Florida-Auburn game. Sloppy game, 8 turnovers, but that worked out perfectly for Florida because the freshman Nix, after a really big game the week before, did not play well at all. And the bottom line was, really, as far as I was concerned, it's one of those games where if Auburn, if the pass to Williams is just a little bit more, on the mark, and it's an easy 7 touchdown on that touchdown pass or that non-touchdown pass, which eventually was an interception in the end zone. And then Derek Brown, possibly the best defensive line in college football, could be number 1 overall pick in the draft this year, stumbles and falls down with 2 other defenders around where he could have just pitched and they could have walked into the end zone. That's 14 points they took off the board in a very tough football game. Even though Florida was the better team, especially with Nix not playing well, those 2 plays that said everything.
And also the Michael Pirone's long touchdown run. They pretty much did a very good job against the run all game, and they just missed a tackle and 80-yard touch, whatever it was, 85-yard touchdown run. So a few big plays. That reminded me of kind of an old school SEC game from 5 or 10 years ago when the league didn't have good quarterback play. This league was great at every position on the field except quarterback. That's what that game reminded me of.
Yeah, and then on the flip side, the 2 big plays Auburn didn't make, Florida made the 2 big plays, the scoring plays, and also the injury outcome after the game, Whitlow out for about a month, maybe more. That's and as we mentioned last week, he may not be Kerryon Johnson, but you remove that equation from their running game, and that is huge.
Yeah, no doubt. He had emerged as obviously the best rusher there, and they don't have, Cam Martin's a guy who's been given opportunities in the past, never really asserted himself. They don't have the depth that they usually have at that position. Now they'll find someone to run the ball, but in years past, they'll have an injury and it's the next man up. I'm not sure that's the case right now.
I mean, is it me, or is it maybe because are we starting to finally see? Because of the passing game is becoming so much more influential in the sport, that we're now seeing a lot more receivers and not as much star running backs. It just seems like you go to these big schools, whether it's Auburn, Michigan, I can go down the line, Iowa, Penn State. I'm not seeing the running backs that we used to see. It's just some teams still have.
They're all going to Georgia and Alabama.
Yeah, right. That's why there's.
I think a few schools have incredible depth, but teams are throwing the ball a bit more, so there's not as many carries to go around to accumulate rushing stats.
So do you think that's the reason? You think down in the lower levels, kids are saying, "Oh, I'd rather be a receiver."
Could be. I mean, I don't know how forward-thinking people are, but there's no doubt that in the NFL, running backs aren't making the money they used to be. So go play defense, go play wide receiver. So that'll be interesting.
LSU, Burrow, 5 more touchdown passes. So we've got the defense of Florida, the 10th-ranked defense against the second-ranked offense. It's going to be real tough for Florida to come right back. They got to go on the road, play a better LSU team, as good as LSU's playing. I just think it's asking way too much. Great job this season by Mullen and the Gators. It's a nice story. The Georgia game is going to be for the SEC championship game. But this is just asking way too much. The big question for me is can they cover the 13?
Yeah, I agree. This team still has some deficiencies, mainly on the offensive line.
Yes.
And it's just a lot to ask emotionally and physically to play the biggest game you played, great crowd, great everything, and go on the road 7 days later and play an LSU team that's not just good. We think it's great. And LSU, didn't have a bye last week, but they played Utah State, barely broke a sweat there, other than the fact that it's probably 100 degrees. So I think this is a really tough spot for Florida. So I like LSU.
LSU is 4-0 against the spread this year, by the way. And the Gators, believe it or not, the only 3-0 team in the SEC. So we'll see if they could. Again, that would be a big deal if they can somehow find a way to ups.
Oh, I mean, that would be obviously.
And where are they right now, odds-wise? What are they like? They're still a pretty significant number, aren't they?
I'm not sure. I would think so. I mean, I think most people, even as we credit this team, we can recognize that it's not in that tier with the top 6 teams right now.
They're 20-1, which is pretty good. It's right. They're actually the first team right after the top 6. So they are getting respect.
Okay.
Not bad.
Yeah.
By the way, Delpit may not play in the game, and that could be a little significant considering he might be their best defensive player. So
no doubt.
All right, also in the SEC, Bama A&M. Now get this, Texas A&M has dropped 13 straight covers after a bye. I don't know what that's about, but here's what's the more important. They're 0-12-1 against the spread their last 13 as SEC dogs of 23 or less against SEC teams with a greater than 600 winning percentage. That tells you that when there's significant dogs against really good football teams, they don't usually do very well. So, and we haven't seen them do very well this season so far.
Yeah, I mean, they're still ranked. They might be one of the more overrated teams in the country. I mean, the 3 games against Power 5 teams they lost handily against Arkansas. I mean, against Clemson, I know they came back and had the cover in the last play. They lost at home handily to Auburn, and then very, very unimpressive 31-27 win over Arkansas on a neutral site. So they're not running the ball very well. Isaiah Spiller, who's filled in for Jayjon Corbin, last 2 games, 6 carries, 9 yards versus Auburn, 7 carries, 0 yards against Arkansas. You got to have some sort of balance to even make to threaten Alabama. So I like the Tide big here.
All right, now, and yeah, I look at that spread, and to me, it's almost like tempting to say, well, 16 is a big number, but it is Alabama. Maybe that's a little bit low. So we'll see.
Yeah, good point.
Georgia's a heavy favorite. Fromm had another real good game, and I tell you, the more, and this is a real good football game because Mauer, the freshman, comes out of nowhere and has a tremendous game. Statistically speaking, it wasn't like, all right, Tua Tagovailoa, but still, we're talking about a true freshman at a big spot that looked really good, especially compared to what they've had to deal with at quarterback play there the last couple of years. And it also shows you from Tennessee's point of view what happens, what a big difference one quarterback makes. That's why when I mentioned that I think like Michigan isn't that far off, I think if you just put a quarterback on that can play at a high level, I think Michigan's right up there. They're a national championship contender. But that's the difference between look how much more, whether it's life into the program or just the offense, that kid re-energized everything at Tennessee.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, played well for a half. I'm a little skeptical. The landscape is littered with freshmen who've come in and provided a jolt. Garantano did it early in his career as well. It's about sustaining it, but no doubt. I mean, they played their best half of the season. It tells you how good you have to beat Georgia. They played their best half, and they're still down 26-14. Yeah. I actually like Tennessee to win this game outright. Yes. I think they can win this game outright. I think Mississippi State is, not really good enough to be a 6, whatever the spread is, 6.5 or point favorite on the road. And I do think there's a renewed sense of energy at Tennessee based on that first half. So I think it's a good spot.
I agree.
For the Vols.
You have Tennessee, I believe, at you're taking the 7 in that game. But yeah, I'm going right there with the money line as well. It's about plus 220. And Tennessee's at Alabama, by the way, next week. First meeting between those two teams since 2012. Stevens may or may not play again. He's dealing with the leg injury from Mississippi State. And I do think that's a big deal because Schrader's got some legs, but he doesn't scare you through the air. And I was
right.
And getting back to Fromm, he's going to be probably the 3rd or 4th quarterback picked in the draft. And let me tell you, he might end up as the best of them all. He kind of reminds me of how you would look at a guy like Brady coming into the draft. Now, of course, Brady was a 6th rounder, but I'm talking about a guy that will kind of not look the part. Game manager, they're going to find ways to make him not look exciting, but I just get the feeling Fromm is going to be a tremendous pro.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by that. I don't think we see him to his fullest extent because of their relatively conservative offense. I think it's because they don't need to show much more. I think he's proven he can make throws when he needs to. He's obviously, looks the part. So I, don't consider myself a scout. Quarterbacks are very difficult to evaluate, but it'd be interesting to see.
All right. By the way, as far as upsets, not only Tennessee, but I actually also like Ole Miss and Arkansas. I think they both have good chances to pull off upsets. I know Missouri's defense is ranked 2nd overall, but they haven't played anybody. It's also the 5th straight home game. I think that can kind of get old. Plus, their top linebackers now out for the season. And I do think that Mississippi's going to get better every week because they've got the young cornerback Plumlee who's looking good. They've got a good coaching. We talked about the assistants that they have. And I also think Arkansas against Kentucky, Sawyer Smith, he's just banged up right now. I don't even think he'd be playing right now if they had like a number 2 or number 3 quarterback that was healthy. They don't have anybody, and the kid wants to go. They did have a week off, but I think he's just nowhere near 100%. So I think Arkansas and Ole Miss and Tennessee are all pretty decent upset possibilities this week.
Yeah, we'll see. I'm intrigued by Ole Miss. I saw them in person last week. They obviously ran the ball well. I'm skeptical of Plumlee and that offense's ability to throw the ball against a good defense. So.
Yeah, it's pretty much all run for that kid. All right, I promised you last week, and I'm going to give it to you this week. The trend of the year for Vanderbilt, and this is a negative. You ready for this one? This is just like one of those trends that make no sense, but it is kind of crazy. Vanderbilt has dropped 18 straight games in 18 straight years in the 6th game of the season.
So the 6th game of the season.
How weird is that?
How many times have they played UNLV?
Well, 0, but
0.
They did in 2009 lose as a 10-point home favorite to a 5-win Army team. So I did kind of, because I get you. There was Georges in there and things of that nature. So I was, did they have anybody that they were like a heavy favorite against? And that's so I went back to 2009 and did see they were double-digit favorite and lost in week 6. So you never know.
I remember a lot of Vanderbilt games. I don't remember that Vanderbilt losing to Army that year, but I'm not doubting you. Obviously, I'm sure it happened.
That was you could double check it for me, but that's from my research, so you can double check.
Yeah, lost 16-13. Yeah, it was at Army. I remember that.
Okay, there you go.
There's bad call in that game. I remember.
All right, Big Ten.
But we don't need to bring it up.
Okay. Let's go to Big Ten. And Ohio State, again, proves how good they are against Michigan State. To me, it was interesting because Michigan State's defense early in the game really looked like they were going to give Ohio State problems. But what happened is Michigan State just, as usual, couldn't make key plays when they had to. Their offense didn't do much, and so they get blown out. But it did show me that what does happen eventually when Ohio State plays a really good defense and a team that has an offense, and then we'll find out whether or not Fields can make big plays under pressure.
Yeah, I think we start judging these teams to such a high standard. Yep. And the fact that they, we might have discovered a few warts that we didn't know were there, but they still won the game handily. So I see what you're saying. But, they continue. I still think you can make an argument that I don't have them ranked number 1, but you can make an argument that they could be ranked number 1 in the country.
I got to be honest with you. I think you could make an argument for all 6 teams. And that's good. It's good news for us as fans. Penn State and Iowa this week. Boy, Iowa, my 5-star, couldn't even muster a touchdown to cover the spread. 4 turnovers, 8 sacks in the game. That was just bad offense, really good defense for Michigan. Michigan's offense just is, again, Patterson is not going to wake up and become a star. The defense can only carry them so far. As far as Iowa, they now have to play Penn State this week, and here's the James Franklin trend. He is 2-11 straight up, 1-12 against the spread away as a head coach, Vandy, Penn State, versus conference teams with records above or a winning percentage above 666. So basically, when Franklin goes on the road and plays good football teams, his teams lose.
Yeah, I mean that's hard to deny that stat. Obviously each team's different. This team is playing extremely well. I like Penn State to take care of business, though. I just think they are. We kind of got lulled into I don't know what the phrase I'm looking for. That Pitt game. Everyone kind of scaled back your expectations, but outside of that, they have been dominant. And I know it's just Maryland and a banged up Purdue team, but they've dominated their last 2 opponents.
They did what they had to do, just like when Ohio State dominates. They did what they had to do.
Yeah, I worry about Iowa's ability to run the ball. Penn State's defense is outstanding, so I like Penn State.
Yeah, I could actually see, because the spread's in that trend too. I could see Penn State winning by 3 and not covering. But this is a big test because Clifford has now 6 TDs combined total in his last 2 games, so he's starting to now feel more comfortable in the offense. To me, and that's the difference between Penn State and Michigan. I trust Clifford actually more right now than I do Shea Patterson.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, he's been a nice surprise.
And by the way, Penn State white out next Saturday night at home against Michigan, and they will travel to Ohio State late in the year. And that's actually going to be the week before Ohio State travels to Michigan. So tough 2 games to end the season for Ohio State, but we'll find out how for real Penn State is on Saturday. What do you think about Michigan?
Yeah, no doubt. I'm looking. What
do you think about Michigan State and Wisconsin? Because this is one of my favorite, maybe my top double-digit outright upset. Ohio State's one thing, Wisconsin's another. Wisconsin's one-dimensional. I think Michigan State's defense should be able to contain Wisconsin's offense and make this a pretty even football game. So a bounce here and a bounce there, and I can see Michigan State winning the game.
Yeah, I'm eager to see, like you said, Wisconsin. How balanced can they be? Jack Cohn's been good this year, but he's got to prove he can do it against a really good defense like Michigan State's defense there. I'll take, Wisconsin at home here, but would not be surprised with an ugly 13-3-ish, 13-10 Michigan State win.
And Wisconsin, by the way, this is their 5th straight home game. 4 of their last 6 are on the road, including at Ohio State, at Nebraska, at Minnesota in that final game that we've already talked about. And that, of course, could wind up being for the Big Ten championship game, Minnesota hosting Wisconsin, final game of the season. And
imagine that. Gophers in at that point.
I love it.
Yeah.
And Minnesota, 7.5-point favorite against Nebraska. This is going to wind up being one of my top picks. I think Nebraska shot their wad against Northwestern. They this and that to try to. I mean, how they even won that game because the Northwestern can't get a field goal. They get a field goal. They can't put up points against the Wildcats. Martinez is banged up. Spielman's banged up. I think Minnesota's got Rutgers and Maryland next. I think they take care of business against Nebraska, and especially if Martinez is not anywhere near 100%.
Yeah, Minnesota quietly has some good skill players. Morgan's playing well at quarterback. They've got depth at running back, and Tyler Johnson, I believe it is, very good wide receiver.
Actually, I believe maybe outside of Alabama, they have the 2 best wide receivers in college football, Bateman and Johnson. That's how good Bateman's played this year, because he's actually played better than Johnson this year.
Have you seen LSU play football this year? Have you seen LSU play?
Oh, I still. I'll throw LSU into the Alabama, but if I'm taking top 2, I'm going to say Bateman and Johnson. If Burrow or Tua were throwing to them, you know what I'm saying? I think we might think differently. But, yeah, I think they're in the mix. Let's just put it that way. And by the way, Indiana is one of your top picks, and I agree with you. I mean, Rutgers is just dead right now, and
no show after no show.
Yeah,
for
and Penix looked like a real solid quarterback against Michigan State. They should blow out Rutgers.
I agree. I hope so. No offense to you.
Hey, you got to live and learn. Greg Schiano, where are you? Okay. Let's now move on to the ACC. Crazy games last week. Virginia Tech and Pitt, and you had Louisville, Pitt, and Virginia Tech all winning some crazy high-scoring games. I don't even know what to think of Miami at this point in time. You have Perry has a big game. I think that's part of the reason why they're a 2-3-point favorite against Virginia. I don't know what Vegas is seeing. I think this is more of a national perspective. Virginia is a better team than Miami, and I certainly hope they go ahead and prove it on Friday night.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. Drawing a blank on the starter at Miami, not Perry, the kid.
Williams, Jaron Williams.
Jaron Williams threw 3 picks in 7 attempts. So once they got him out of the game, their offense was obviously a lot more productive, although they did have to throw the ball a lot because they were down. I get that, but they came back and took the lead there. Virginia, we keep asking them to kind of prove it to us.
Right.
They proved it in the opener. They wanted Pitt. They proved it. They beat Florida State, but I'm interested to see how they play because they did not play great against Florida State in 1. They did not play well against Old Dominion. We're down 17-0, had to rally back. Obviously had some issues at the line of scrimmage against Notre Dame. How will they respond to a good defense against Miami or, pretty good defensive front? So I'm with you. I like Virginia, but I'm a little concerned.
I also like the fact that they had a week to prepare, whereas Miami comes up with this really tough, hard-fought game. So I think that speaks to something. Also, let's keep in mind, Virginia did outgain Notre Dame. And so there's something there. I just think they're a better team, but they're the type of team that is not going to blow anybody out. So they can't turn the ball over, little thing here, little thing there. And it's always going to be a game that goes down to the fourth quarter against good football teams. Yeah. And that's a dangerous way to play.
Sometimes be careful about total yards. Notre Dame scored 2 defensive touchdowns, so that's 2 possessions they did not have to move the ball.
All right, now let's tonight's game, Syracuse, NC State. I kind of like Syracuse in this game. NC State's got nothing going at quarterback. I'm kind of surprised the line has continued to grow to about 5 points in this one. I just think Syracuse is a better football team than NC State.
Yeah, this is sort of like 2 teams that we just kind of forgot about. I had real high hopes for Syracuse. I had decent hopes for for NC State. But Syracuse is, they're we don't know much about them. They're 3-2. They beat 3 teams they should beat, and then they got blown out by Maryland and Clemson. So, the Maryland game's obviously the one that's concerning. But I'm with you. NC State has been uninspiring so far. Even one of their wins, they beat Ball State 34-23. You're right, McKay has not been good at the quarterback position. So I'm with you. I'll go Syracuse on the road.
All right, now Florida State Clemson. It looks like Taggart is going to go along with your analysis and go with Blackman.
Willie and I talked. Yeah.
So we'll see how that. Now I think that's a very short leash though, and we'll see how that goes. But that kind of a short leash could be all that matters, because if they go down 2 scores, the game's probably over anyway.
Right.
So I don't agree with the decision, but we'll see. Look, the way Clemson's played this year, I can't look at this game and go, oh, Clemson blowout. I think this game could be real close. We'll see. I don't know what to expect from Clemson, the way they played this season.
Yeah, and I keep saying every week, despite Florida State's issues, they're a few plays away from being undefeated.
There you go.
Could have won that Virginia game. Could have won that Boise State game.
And they got motivation. They got destroyed at home last year by Clemson. So we'll see exactly what happens. And the shoulder thing with Trevor Lawrence, I don't know what to make of that. So we'll see whether or not that's significant or not. Now, you've got your upset pick this week is Louisville against Wake Forest, which is interesting because this is actually going to be one of my top picks. I like Wake Forest, no surprise. Louisville, it was a nice win for Louisville against BC. Both teams had to go to their backup quarterbacks in that game. But I just think Wake Forest is a better football team. I'm not even sweating that one. It's a 6-point spread. Why did you like Louisville on this one to pull off the upset?
Good question. It was more of Wake, flirting with disaster this year. They needed a 4th down play to beat Utah State at home. They 27-24 over BC. North Carolina got the big lead, had to hold on. So, in their 3 games against their 3 best wins, they didn't exactly look great. I mean, it's Wake. I don't want to poke holes in a 5-0 start there. I just kind of a momentum pick for Louisville. They're down to the 3rd quarterback last week. It's clear that Satterfield, is doing a great job statistically. They're one of the most improved teams in the country so far this year over last year, if you look at a yards per play basis. So it's kind of a gut feeling.
Evan Conley, the true freshman, was the one that bailed him out.
Yeah.
So we'll see what.
He was an App State commit. To the staff.
And by the way, you mentioned Utah State. Do you think that the loss of that significance, they barely had 100 yards of total offense, is going to hurt a team like Boise State if they go undefeated?
Can't help. 2 schools of thought. One is transitive properties, are difficult, shouldn't apply. But common sense says, one of maybe the 2nd best team in the Mountain West plays LSU, and they don't belong on the field with them. So I can see that argument. We'll see what happens. But Boise State went on the road, won at Florida State, so that's obviously a positive. So we'll see.
Big 12, big game of the weekend, Oklahoma, Texas. And after Oklahoma beat Kansas, Kansas fired their offensive coordinator. What was that about?
I think it was Les Miles finally realizing, that's one reason, I was really concerned about Kansas when they hired him. Has he changed his offensive philosophy? And he goes out and hires one of his old buddies, Les Koenig, as offensive coordinator, but pulled the plug on that one. So, good. That's always a difficult thing to do. Kansas, I believe, was up 7-0 in that game, and then Oklahoma obviously flexed its muscles afterwards.
I guess there's just not enough room in Kansas for more than one less.
For 2 less, yes.
All right, Oklahoma, Texas. Last 5 meetings decided by 7 points or less. Texas beats Oklahoma in the regular season, and that probably hurt them because they had to beat Oklahoma twice in the same season. They couldn't do it in the Big 12 championship game. Ellinger against Hurts. The thing about this game to me is the line continues to grow. I don't know why. I know Texas doesn't have a good defense, and Oklahoma's defense seems to be better, but it's still, I don't understand why there's not enough respect for Texas after what they did with LSU. I think this is a flip of the coin game as it has been the last few years. And that's why I'm taking Texas. I have no problem taking them to win the game outright as well. Why would I pass on taking Texas as a 3-1 money line play when they can win this game?
That Oklahoma offense is pretty darn good. Here's the stat: they lead the nation with 7.8 yards per rush, and they lead the nation with 12.7 yards per passing attempt. They're the most efficient offense running and passing. I know the schedule hasn't been great yet, hasn't been great so far, but I would go Texas to cover. But I feel really good about Oklahoma winning the game.
Isn't this the same thing though that we talk about the last few years that Texas has actually looked better than we thought? Mayfield. Murray.
Yeah, here's different too, though.
And since we have that point system where 300 points goes to the 5-star, that's probably what I'm going to do. I'll put 300 on the 5-star with Texas with the points instead of 100 on the money line for the same 300. See what I'm saying? Because. Yeah, so that's probably what I'll wind up doing. I just think this game is going to be right down to the wire. I don't see Oklahoma that much better than Texas, if at all. I don't know. I mean, before the regular season began, who was your pick to win this conference?
Oklahoma.
And what was it? Oklahoma-Texas championship game, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. What about the rest of the Big 12? You've got a couple other games, Baylor, Texas Tech. This game is at Baylor. They had 8 previous meetings at Arlington. So Baylor's an 11-point favorite. Duffy had a big game in the upset for the Red Raiders last week.
Yeah, we'll find out, was that a case of Texas Tech figuring some things out offensively that they hadn't figured out yet, or was that a case of playing Oklahoma State, who, got some issues defensively? Obviously, probably a little bit of both, but I like Baylor. Baylor's kind of, I was going to say quietly, but maybe not so quietly emerging as the third best team in the league.
Yeah, that's why that was a significant win against Iowa State, because it could have went either way. Whoever won that game ends up the de facto third team because of it. And Baylor still has to play just like Iowa State, the big boys coming up. Injuries to keep an eye on. Jack Anderson, the best offensive lineman for Texas Tech, is out for the season. Baylor's best offensive lineman's out 4 to 6 weeks. And West Virginia loses their number 1 and number 3 receivers. The number 1 receiver, Sam James, got a head injury, so he's out. Sean Ryan's out. And you know what? If it wasn't for Kendall's 4 picks, that was a pretty good football game for West Virginia last week. Iowa State's kind of a heavy favorite, though, 10.5. I'm not sure I would give the 10.5.
Yeah, I don't have a strong feeling about this game. West Virginia's been a weird team. They played well, like you said last week. They had the turnovers. They probably should have lost to Kansas a few weeks ago. Got outgained in that game by a per play basis. So they've been a tough team to figure. Obviously, they've made some strides after a really tough start.
Pac-12, Oregon handled Cal. It was closer than maybe most people thought. But as I mentioned, I'm not surprised Cal's defense kept them in the game as long as they could. Stanford with a surprise win. Boy, David Mills is starting to look like the next really good Stanford quarterback. He had his breakout game against Washington. And Arizona continues to be maybe the surprise team of the Pac-12. They get the win over Colorado, and they will be hosting Washington this week. And you got Oregon hosting Colorado on Friday night. There's a ton of injuries for Colorado, a lot of guys banged up. But I think Colorado, knowing the Pac-12, I think Colorado is going to be in that football game tomorrow night at Oregon. And I think Arizona might just be able to pull it out against Washington.
Yeah, I like Arizona, actually. Khalil Tate has been solid. That was a fun game, the Colorado game. I think I wrote it down somewhere, but like 7 or 8 lead changes or more. Basically, every score was a lead change in there. And Arizona, they are a play or 2 away against Hawaii in the opener from being undefeated. They had that disastrous start defensively, but they've gotten better. Oregon's defense has been great. They gave up the first touchdown since week 1. But only 1 touchdown to Cal. So I like Oregon comfortably at home, and I like Arizona in the upset.
Yeah, you got an Arizona team, by the way, that I don't think people realize this, but because of Tate, they're the 6th best offense in college football. So they've got a more explosive offense than Washington, and they're getting 6. Wow, imagine Washington 1-3 in the Pac-12.
That'd be crazy. Like, who would have thought 1-2 Washington versus 2-0 Arizona?
And Oregon will be at Washington next week, so that'll be a big game.
Yep,
Colorado has won both games away from home this year, so that's why I think, because Colorado has kind of had one of those seasons where they'll lose and you kind of think, maybe they're not really, and then they go out and they win a game maybe they're not supposed to. So I just think if they can keep a few of these key guys, these guys that are banged up on the field on Friday night, that could be a good football game.
Yeah, it'll be, I mean, a nice test for Oregon.
The USC Notre Dame rivalry Saturday night. USC now 1-14 against the spread. Last 15 is a road dog, which is disgusting. Solvis will play for USC at quarterback, but Notre Dame has owned this series lately. They're a superior team to USC. They're a 10-point favorite. This will probably end up being one of my top picks.
Yeah, I like Notre Dame. I think they're kind of undervalued. They look really good against Georgia and then beat up at the line of scrimmage, Virginia 2 weeks ago and took her, obviously, Bowling Green last week. I agree. I like Notre Dame.
Yeah, a lot to expect a young kid, USC kid, to come out on the road, nighttime and all that. Claypool ankle injury, but they get Armstrong back. So that evens that out. Yeah. Arizona State, Washington State, Utah, Oregon State. Big win for Oregon State last week, but it looks like Zach Moss returns for Utah.
Yeah, much needed there. Obviously they got to keep their big two healthy, which they've had trouble doing the last 2 years.
If they could do that, then they could end up being the best team in the conference. Tulane had a big win over Army last week, so our boy Willie Fritz continues to do an excellent job. A couple of games of note there: Army, Western Kentucky, because Western Kentucky, a Conference USA team, is a 3-0 Conference USA team. So Tyson Helton looks like he's doing a pretty good job there.
Yeah, got off to a tough start, losing to Central Arkansas at home, and kind of everyone forgot about them. But you're right, they've got a nice start in league play.
And with BYU's injuries, I think we need to keep an eye on the fact that they are going to start an African American quarterback for the first time in their program's history.
Wow, good little nugget there. Did not realize that.
And South Florida, they got healthy against UConn, but everybody believes Charlie Strong's on the outs. If this kid can play, the quarterback, then BYU's the play. But I tell you what, if BYU can't beat South Florida the way they're going, I think it's the end of the road for Kentucky, and I think it's time to call Mike Leach.
Yeah. I mean, Sataki got off to a nice start this year and big win in Tennessee, USC. But, I mean, if that schedule's brutal in the front and then you get banged up and then you lose to some teams you need to beat, like South Florida.
AAC, a very underrated conference. Cincinnati with a huge win against Central Florida. SMU held on. Well, they had a huge comeback down 30-9. It's interesting because we talked about this last week. Your buddy liked Tulsa in the game, so he got the cover. I got the win, so we both won. But wow, AAC, you got Cincinnati, SMU, Memphis, Temple, Tulane, Navy. This is a really good conference.
Yeah, no, it is. It is. It's fun, like SMU, like you said, survived a big scare. Tulane, really quality road win last week. So I'm
and your
totally
5-star is Navy this week.
Yeah, I just think with Malcolm Perry healthy, I think they would have had a chance to beat Memphis. He was banged up in the second half against Memphis. I think Tulsa just emotional loss last week. How do they bounce back?
And a great win for Navy against Air Force.
Yes.
Mountain West, Hawaii gets blown out every time they play Boise. As you remember, this was my pick to play in the championship game, Hawaii. So I feel good, obviously, about the way that they're playing. This is a measuring stick game for Hawaii now. I'm intrigued. I part of me thinks that Hawaii is going to give them a football game.
Yeah, Cole McDonald leads the nation in interceptions, so that's going to be the key. They good McDonald, not bad McDonald.
And Fresno, Air Force, Wyoming, San Diego State are also good football games, especially that Wyoming San Diego State game. That's huge. So these are some big Mountain West Conference games this weekend.
Yeah, totally. I mean, San Diego State, we're used to the San Diego State, Fresno State threshold in the West there, but I think neither of those teams are as good as they've been in recent years.
Mike New came up with the big win for Ball State, finally, program-defining win. Now he's got to follow that up against Eastern Michigan, and you know what? I think he's going to do it. I mean, they've had competitive losses to Indiana, FAU, and NC State. They got some big games coming up. I think they're playing better than Eastern Michigan right now.
Yeah, Eastern Michigan, real disappointing last week. Our guy, Chris Creighton, losing at home to Central Michigan. You can't lose that rivalry game there, Chris. But, yeah, Ball State, nice win at Northern Illinois. You're right.
All right, and as far as the rest of your picks, who else do you have that we did not cover?
Yeah, Navy won. I got MTSU plus 10.5
Middle
over FAU.
Tennessee, that's right. Is that because of the long, is like the domination they've had over them?
A little bit, but I'm just not a big fan of Lane Kiffin's teams when Kendall Browse is not calling plays. Interesting note here. Brent Stockstill, the son and former quarterback at MTSU, was on the FAU staff. So Stockstill on Stockstill action. Indiana minus 28 over Rutgers. UL Monroe minus 3 over Texas State. Mentioned Tennessee plus 6.5 over Mississippi State. My upset pick was Louisville over.
Good luck to Spividal. They're looking to win 3 games in a row for the first time since 2013 when Dennis Francione was coaching Texas State.
Wow.
So
good luck there.
Good luck there. All right. Appreciate it as always, Mitch. Where are you off to next time?
Home game, UNLV.
Oh, that's right. Watch out for that.
See if Vanderbilt can win that 6th game of the season.
Spread the rumors around the stadium if it's close.
I already
at
have.
halftime.
I just DM'd a buddy of mine during the show about that stat, so it better be right.
It is. I'm telling you, my sources are impeccable. Thanks a lot. We'll talk to you again next week.